Heyo friendos, welcome back. Or if it is your first time here, hello, my name is Laurel. I am not a pro MUA, I am just a weirdo that likes collecting and experimenting with really nice makeup. For this one, we are going to be discussing one of my favorite topics, which is eyeshadow palettes. So if you adore eyeshadow palettes, I invite you to subscribe right now. It's a reoccurring theme on this channel. I think eyeshadow palettes present their users a unique experience of both creative challenges and creative freedom and working within a curated color story. I am thrilled that Samantha March and Allie Glines came up with this tag. It just seems like so much fun. So I wanted to give it a try myself, but you know, it wouldn't be a Laurel Luxe video if I didn't make some of my own modifications to the list, so we will see some deviation from their original video as I added some categories of my own. Now it's time for me to stop prattling and get to the video. I hope you'll keep watching. So we'll start this video with my newest palette, which is the Star Ranch palette from Jeffree Star Cosmetics. I currently have a review up on my channel. You should definitely check it out if you haven't done so already. But spoiler alert, I really enjoyed this palette. Next is my oldest palette, and this is the X Bomb. I'm not gonna say the real word because I know what it's like to have nephews and I don't want them asking me what certain words mean. So if you're at home with kids, I'm not a prude, I just try to be mindful of people's situations. This is my oldest palette. This was another one that was a gift from my sister who lives in Florida when we were much younger. And it's old, I don't use it anymore, but I really enjoy the color story of it. Like, I think it's pretty inspirational and unique, so I've held on to it for all these years. Next is my most expensive palette. No surprise, it comes from Natasha Denona, and it is my Sunset palette. I love this palette. The color story is very warm tone and it accentuates my blue eyes. This also has one of her best matte formulas of all time. I do not regret paying the money. Now it's time for my least expensive palette, which is the Essence Never Give Up Your Daydream palette. So the formulation on this is not fantastic, but it's not terrible. I like that it gives me an array of pastel inner corner highlight shades that can be built up over time. It's a little bit of work to build them up, so I don't recommend this palette, but I wouldn't necessarily deter you if you thought that you would enjoy it. For my most colorful palette, it is the Jawbreaker by Jeffree Star Cosmetics. In all honesty, this is probably my most used palette, but I'm not trying to have the same palette in multiple categories, so we're gonna go with most colorful for this one. Next is my smallest palette. This one was a Christmas gift, again, from my sister who lives in Florida. I've absolutely enjoyed this palette. I especially love this olive green shade in here and the duochrome shade. Did I say this is Natasha Denona Mini Gold? Because that's what it is. Now for my biggest palette, it's technically a different one from Morphe, but I'm saving that for another category. So it's the original Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. I've had her since she first launched. I think that it's a good warm tone color story, but this one is finally starting to show its age, and I notice when I apply it, it's not applying as good as it used to be, so this one might be retiring its way out of my collection very soon. Next is Best Memory. Now this is kind of funny to me because this was my first ever big girl palette, and my sister and I, the one who lives with me, went to the mall together to pick this up, and they had some sort of special going on where if you bought the palette, you could have your makeup done with the palette by one of their pro MUAs. So we went to the mall together, we picked this up, and we thought it was the coolest thing in the world. It does smell like peaches, and even though it's older, I've still used this recently and it is not showing its age at all. The makeup job that the makeup artist did on me was honestly kind of bland. Like, I told her that I was a-okay with doing something bold and outlandish, but I just remember it being like very plain and neutral, which is okay. It still looked cute, but it was just a fun experience. I don't know how to explain it. It was just the experience of thinking that I was getting luxury at the time. And it was just a fun day with my sister. Next is Worth the Hype. When this palette first came out, I thought that there was no way that it was worth the hype. But then someone gifted it to me. It was a friend that I had met on Instagram. She sent this my way and I have been loving it ever since. It's the Blood Sugar palette. What a fantastic original color story. Lots of warm tones also mixed with cool. Very, very good palette. Next, and not worth the hype, it is the Morphe Such a Gem. So it could be that mine is just a dud, but I can't help but feel a little bit mildly deceived from all the positive reviews that I saw from people I trusted on YouTube about this palette. It's just not good. There's not a lot of color payoff with this palette, and to be honest, I really don't enjoy picking up a matte shade and having to build it up for 15 minutes to be able to see anything. I have sensitive eyelids, and eventually that starts to hurt when I just have to keep blending and blending and blending. And also the pressed glitters in here are just subpar. So yeah, I just feel like this one was not worth the hype. For favorite palette from a favorite brand, I have the Sandstone palette from ColourPop. Can you see why I would love this? Lots of beautiful warm tone shades. Check out this one. Oh, this one's just a weirdo shade. I shouldn't be swatching these, like, but just, I love it. So gorgeous. I have a review up on my channel already with this palette. It was my first ever video. It's a little cringe, but if you want to check it out, it's up there. So most use. Like I said before, I'm trying not to do duplicate palettes. So for this one, I'm going with Cremated. I always end up incorporating this with another palette, it seems, because this one offers you a lot of depth and dimension in the color story. Also, the formulations of the sparklier shades in the palette is to die for. Pun intended. For a palette that I have used every single shade in, it is the Riviera by Anastasia Beverly Hills. This one is so colorful and marvelous. I have used every single shade in here, although I will say I feel like these two are not their absolute best matte formulations. A lot of times companies do get purples wrong, so it's somewhat understandable. It's not the worst purple I've ever used, but it's not like luxury purple. But these shimmer shades are why I bought the palette, and I dip into this quite a bit. Next up is Beautiful Color Story. Bad formulation. For this one, I'm going with the Lime Crime Venus XL2. Here she is. Isn't this color story gorgeous? There's even a shade called Laurel in there. Not why I picked it up, but it was the icing on the cake. So yeah, I think that this color story is one, if not the most beautiful color stories I've ever seen in a palette. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if it's because of formulation, as in the chemical formulation, material formulation, or if it's just where it was too hard pressed, but I have a hard time with the eyeshadows within this palette. It's hard to pick up some on my brush, others just don't blend out very well and are very patchy, and the sparkly shades look so much better in the pan than they do on the eyes, unfortunately. So I have heard that this has been reformulated. I don't know if it is better now and I just got one of the first and one of the worst. I would not recommend this palette for the version that I have. Next we have Best Influencer Collab, and this one was so easy for me. It's even what I have on my eyes today. Can you guess what it is? Leave it in the comments down below if you want to give your guess before I show it off. 3, 2, 1. It is the Mel Thompson and Sydney Grace collaboration. This is her Tiny Marvels palette. Check out this color story. This is the embodiment of a perfect palette, if you ask me. So for one, it has the perfect amount of pans. I appreciate when there is enough room for creativity. So there's at least 10 pans. That gives you enough options. But also 15 says that you were selective, that you actually went through and curated and thought about what colors look good together. So for me, this palette is A+++. The formulation is fantastic. The only thing I would change about it is the spider. I try just not to look at him, or kind of the centipede too. I think Mel Thompson really likes like insects and stuff, but it's not my thing. But yeah, it's really not my thing. But again, fantastic palette. If you don't own this one, I highly recommend you pick it up. Next is Worst Influencer Collab. And I think for most people who don't mind a bit of honesty, then you might agree with me. It is the Pure and Raw Beauty Kristi collab. Again, this is nothing against Kristi. I review makeup on this channel. I don't review people. Pure's eyeshadow formula is just weird. I thought the color story was interesting enough. I actually liked this side more than I did the color story on this one. It's just, this side to me is not that unique, whereas this one seems to be a little more thought out in the neutral category. But the main reason why I really did not enjoy this palette is the formulation is weird. I've never experienced eyeshadows, and this even goes for like really cheap eyeshadows. I've never experienced eyeshadows that just don't blend and they just sit on your eye like a weird powder. I mean, I know that they're all powders, but this is strange. The colors just sit on the skin, they don't blend together, and honestly, I regret spending money on this palette. And may you return to the depths from whence ye came! Next, for Best Warm Tone Palette, it is the Bronze Seduction. This is from Pat McGrath Labs. Incredibly fun color story to work with. Wonderful formulation. I have nothing negative to say about this palette. I love her. Next is my favorite cool tone palette, which is Pat McGrath Labs again, the original Subliminal palette. If you watched my Natasha Denona ranking video, then you know that this was my #1. If you're interested to see where all my other Pat McGrath Labs palettes fell, because I own pretty much all of them except for one, feel free to check those out. That video is on my channel. This next one I feel like is another one that might be easy to guess, so here's your second opportunity to play along. This is going to be most controversial. What was the most controversial palette of all time? All right, leave your answer down below. 3, 2, 1. It is the Subculture palette. I flippin' love this palette. I've got to be real with you guys. I kind of feel like that the problem with the Subculture, where some people were loving it and some people were hating it, was more due to there being inconsistencies with the formula than it was actually personal taste. And I can't prove that, but I have used this palette so many times. I have used every single shade in this palette, and I've never had trouble with any of the shades. I will say, like, there might be a small bit of fallout, but I did see some people use their palettes on YouTube, and it truly was just performing differently than how mine did. But yeah, I'm so glad to have fall come around. I will never throw away this palette unless it just gets really bad. So even though it's retired, it's still my baby. Lastly, we have always in my travel bag, and that is the KVD Edge of Reality palette. I think this palette is so underrated for what it is. First off, beautiful jewel tone color story, wonderful blendable mattes, and then very shock absorbent cheap packaging. So that's why this one always finds its way in my travel bag, because I don't worry about it breaking on any flight. Friendos, I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I hope you'll give it a big thumbs up. If not, I'll just be here crying softly to myself as usual. Just kidding. Please subscribe if you have not done so already. I truly appreciate all your support. And please comment down below. Let me know if you own some of these palettes yourself, or if you think that there was a more appropriate palette that maybe I don't know about that could have fit one of these categories. Again, I really appreciate you coming and spending your time here with me, and I can't wait to see you again. But should you choose not to subscribe, we shall forever live our lives wondering what could have been. All right, guys, bye.